Physics Bites,
a science podcast in English
by the students of Notre Dame.
So, hello and welcome to another episode of Physics Bites, the English language podcast of the DNL students in Notre Dame de Sion here in Paris. We are continuing with our new group talking about the carbon footprint of different parts of the society that we have. Today we have a group who is going to talk to us about the carbon footprint of the internet. I have in front of me 4 students. Can you guys introduce yourselves?
So hello, my name is Etienne.
We have Etienne.
My name is Victor.
Victor.
My name is Louise.
Louise. And
my name is Anastasia.
Anastasia. So you guys were all 4 in my class last year in Seconde, and you guys worked on the internet this time. I have 2 co-hosts this time.
Hello, my name is Marion.
Marion, who is going to be talking to us at another time about agriculture, and
my name is Carla.
And Carla, you heard her last time when she was talking about the carbon footprint of energy in our society today. So, as usual, we're going to begin with maybe a short summary you guys are going to give us about, in general, what the main carbon footprint of the internet is, where it's coming from, and just a global summary of what you guys presented to us in class. So, who wants to start? Maybe we can begin with Anastasia.
Today we're going to present our topic, which is internet. We will explain how it produces carbon emissions from the manufacturing to its use and how it produces in different sectors.
Okay. So, who wants to talk to us about the first bit of how the internet produces a lot of carbon emissions? Etienne?
So the internet produces carbon emission through different sectors, such as the production of the computers and all the electrical stuff.
So this is the physical material production of the components that go into making computers and servers and the infrastructure.
Yes.
Okay.
But also through the usage of those components and with the storage
yeah,
of the data in data centers.
Right. So basically there's the material side of things and then there's the usage of the internet. Which one produces more carbon? Did you guys is it more the production of the materials or is it the actual infrastructure when we put in place?
More the usage.
Right. And it's been more and more the last few years because of how much we've increased. Okay. So what else? Can you guys have some numbers maybe to give us about the overall carbon footprint of the internet, the different parts of it, how we can think about the different aspects?
Well,
Anastasia?
In Europe, 20% of carbon emissions come from manufacturing versus 80% for use, according to ADEME. And in France, it's 45% for manufacturing versus 55% for use.
Okay. So again, it depends on if you're a country that has a lot of manufacturing or not. But in general, we see that overall the use of the internet, whether it's for like watching shows on streaming services or reading the news, listening to music, that is what the main part of this is. Okay. Why does internet usage have a carbon footprint? Why does that produce carbon? Why are the carbon emissions linked to watching something on YouTube or Netflix or something like that? Louise?
Because when you watch television or use your laptop computer, or when you have your email pollution, all of this produces carbon emissions because of the transport of all the data information.
Which all uses electricity.
Yes.
Right. So basically the electricity we use to run the internet is what the main source of carbon emissions are. Okay. What else? Do you guys have some more numbers from the different things you guys talked? You talked about so many different things, whether it was from computers, smartphones, you talked about the different web traffic. I remember, Victor, you were talking about that, the mobile networks and stuff like that. Do you guys want to, maybe Victor, do you want to give it
I was talking about more specifically networks and web traffic, and especially streaming, which represents 60% of web traffic and produces 100 million tons of CO2 per year.
So in a way, that's the biggest part of the carbon footprint of the internet is the streaming services we use? Okay. You also talked about, for example, the differences in mobile networks, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Can you give us a bit short summary of that as well, maybe?
4G and 5G infrastructures produces 23 times more carbon than Wi-Fi infrastructures.
Right. We'll get back maybe afterwards to how we can reduce our carbon footprint from the internet, because you guys talked a fair bit about that as well. Louise, you talked to us about, for example, smartphones, I think.
Yes.
Can you go over some of the stuff you told us, and from emails, I think?
Yes.
Interesting.
From the digital email pollution, that's 400 million tons of CO2 generated every year. And by comparison, the global air transport pollution produces 869 million tons of CO2 per year. However, when we say 400 million tons, it's a number that is largely underestimated because it do not take in consideration all the amount of the spam pollution.
Right. You were talking to us about how there have been some calculations done about, for example, just the number of emails that we receive per day and how you can sort of get an idea of how much carbon emission that represents. But in general, I guess if we want to go to the second part and talk about the reduction of these carbon emissions, most of this comes back to the same thing, is about where our energy comes from, right? So if we use electricity that was not emitting carbon, then internet use would have a much smaller footprint, right? But let's talk about how we can maybe reduce in different sectors of our internet usage. Etienne, you talked about, for example, with data centers.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about what data centers are, how they represent the carbon emissions, and how we can reduce it? What are some ideas about that?
So data center produce a lot of CO2 emissions, representing 2% of the global emissions.
Right, not just global internet emission, but global carbon emissions. Can you just very quickly tell us what we mean by data centers? Why are they so important, and what they represent when it comes to the internet?
So data centers are the place where all the data is stored.
Yeah.
And basically, without data centers, there is no internet.
Right. So the internet is basically the connection between data centers, and data centers is where all that information that we get is stored. Yes. Whether it's movies, whether it's news articles, whether it's homework.
Yes.
Okay. So, so continue. You were talking about their carbon emissions and the way to reduce them.
So we could reduce carbon emissions from the data center by using a greener energy, but that's not a solution. So mainly data center produce CO2 with their cooling system.
Right.
So
why do we need to cool data centers?
Because the computers are heating up because of the electricity that runs in them, and we have to cool them to prevent computers from overheating and destroying themselves. So we could reduce the emission of the cooling system by building data centers in colder countries, for example.
So that was one of the options, was the idea of building it in colder places where they need heat, and then taking this heat from the data centers.
Yes.
Okay. What are some of the other ideas you had?
Other solution, or there are projects of data centers, of undersea data centers, or of data centers that use oil to cool the servers.
Yeah. So basically, what we use for cooling most of the time in our computers is just a ventilator, a fan that's pushing the hot air away, and it's being replaced by colder air, which is getting heated up. But there are more efficient ways of doing this. Instead of using air, you're using a liquid, water in some cases, oil in some cases, which can capture more heat. Right? We're getting to the physics of things there. My co-host, did you guys have any questions about just data centers that you guys had? So we can focus on that while we're at it.
Yes, you talked about the idea of putting data centers underwater, but will it be a problem for the ocean's ecosystem?
I don't think so, because on the scale of the ocean, the size of a data center is basically is negligible. So adding data centers in the ocean won't have a big impact on its ecosystem.
So in a way, you're saying that oceans are big and data centers are small. So while maybe where the data center is, it might have an effect in that area. Overall, it's not going to make a huge effect.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Any other questions about data centers, maybe? Okay. Is there anything more you want to talk about regarding data centers and how we can reduce the carbon emissions from there? Is it mostly, so you're saying basically if we're going to do anything, it has to do with how we cool data centers. Okay. I guess the idea also exists that, like you mentioned at the beginning, to not necessarily reduce this heat, but take this heat, use it to, for example, heat up a city, and that way we use less energy for heating the city, so in a way it's offsetting the carbon emissions from the heat produced by these data centers.
Yes, that's also a possibility that is being envisaged, that have been considered by.
I know, for example, I think in Amsterdam there's a law where if you want to build a data center in the city or close to the city, it has to be connected to the urban heating system, and so this energy is going to be channeled in. And I think there are cities who are starting to do laws of that nature in order to have this kind of thing. Okay, maybe we can move on to another aspect. I think, Anastasia, you were talking about, in general, like fabrication, how we can...
Yeah.
But, so do you want to talk to us about that a bit, maybe? Just maybe about how fabrication and like the material side of is actually a carbon footprint that is non-negligible, and how we can improve that.
Well, most of the time to create the things that we need for in the internet in general, we have to consider the mining of materials and minerals.
So just talking about like computer, telephones, TV, screens.
For chips and...
right, and the processors.
Yeah, and the processors and all. Like you have to get certain minerals that are most of the time in areas that are sensitive to certain conditions.
Right. So, for example, to make chips, we need what we call
silicon, cobalt, and materials that you have
rare
to extract.
earth metals, which are not necessarily in every country, and many of the countries which have these minerals, either they have unstable regimes, or maybe they just don't want to maybe do this with every country. There are political factors in there, you're saying.
Yeah, and it necessitates also a lot of water, so it's not an option for some places where water is rare, and for it to be used to mine those materials is not a good option.
Right, and it's in itself, it's either not possible in a very clean way or not possible because of some sort of technological obstacles. So how can we reduce the carbon footprint of the internet through our change in fabrication and manufacturing, maybe?
Well, the easiest way is to recycle, to stop throwing it away, or to maybe try to do some kind of compounds that will be changed in an easier way, or can be repaired in an easier way to stop throwing it away just. And we can as well do taxes or ideas with companies that manufacture to maybe lessen.
So basically make less stuff. right?
Make
And
less
so
stuff.
use less stuff and consume less stuff.
Yeah, and not buy it, for example, when something new gets out, to buy it and just throw something that you have and that maybe can be used 1 year or 2 years more.
Right. So instead of having a new telephone every 2 years,
Yeah.
maybe we can have a new telephone every 10 years. Right. I think at one point you talked about the idea of obsolescence and built-in obsolescence.
Well, I did.
Or anybody else in the group also, because that's something that I think you guys have come across in other maybe classes as well, the idea of built-in obsolescence into a lot of our products, right?
Yeah.
You want to expand on that maybe?
Yeah, because it's a very important problem that encourage the public to go towards over-consumerism that is organized.
Right,
by-
a change in behavior,
Yes.
which is not only for the internet, but for many of the things that produce
Yes,
carbon.
but especially in these categories, because computers, telephones are the most touched by this.
Right, they're the ones that we are always changing constantly. So
Yes.
it's this idea of built-in obsolescence is a sort of built-in feature of our sort of economic system,
Yeah.
right? Which needs to be changed if you want to produce less carbon, right? Okay. Carla or Marion, do you guys have any questions that from your classmates on this topic of fabrication, manufacturing?
Yes, about the obsolescence of the devices. Do you think there is a way to stop the planned obsolescence of devices?
Right. So how can we change this built-in or planned obsolescence?
Well, to reduce programmed obsolescence, all the importance given to these large groups and their projects would have to stop, but this seems impossible in the society in which we live today.
So it's a hard problem to solve, right?
It's more not a technical problem, but more in the society and the way we see things.
Right. It's a political problem.
Yeah.
It's a social problem. It's a question of our choices when it comes to our economic system. Is it possible? Are you optimistic about that we're going to do this, or not really?
Maybe if we can make people understand that there is no chance for us to continue like this, and that we are lost.
Mhm.
Like if people were more interested in ecological topics, maybe they would understand that now we don't have the choice; we must do it. But
So educating people,
Yeah.
basically, that's always a good solution for
But-
many problems. So what do you guys think? Shall we move on to maybe another aspect?
Just
Marion,
a
you have a question.
Do you think that creating taxes for the companies and limiting the production of
New devices.
will refrain the customer, will prevent the customer from having the full liberty of doing what
They
they
will.
want, what they wish.
So
to
the
do.
idea of putting in laws that would reduce consumption, would it go against the idea of personal freedom?
Yes.
Victor, do you
Basically,
think
it's the goal. It's the goal to limit the liberty of the user.
and do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? Or it's beyond good and bad, it's necessary, regardless of whether it's good or bad?
I don't know. Maybe we'll see in the future.
But if you were in a position to put in place a law that would prevent people from buying a new telephone every less than 5 years, would you do it?
Yeah.
So for you, it's not a bad ethical choice to limit the liberties of
No,
people
it's
when
not.
it comes to that. Why is that? You want to maybe share a bit of how you look at the problem?
Because we need to reduce our consumption of new devices.
So overconsumption is a worse ethical problem than reducing the liberties of the individuals when it comes to consumption in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. He's very clear about his position on this question, which is good. We need people who are clear on their idea, as long as they can reason properly. Maybe we can continue with Victor, who you talked about the idea of mobile connections, like we said, but also streaming. So what did you find in your research about how we can reduce the carbon emission coming from that? What choices we can do? What are your recommendations, Mr. Minister?
One of the solution is to reduce the resolution of the video we watch online.
So, can you give us a short idea of what we mean by resolution of a video?
It's the number of pixels which delimit a video.
So, what does that influence when we're looking at a YouTube video? What does resolution change for us?
When the resolution is higher, more data are downloaded by your computer.
Right. So it makes a better image. It has a higher quality image, but to have this higher quality, we have more information, and this more information requires more energy to transmit and to stream. Okay. So what would you suggest? How can we reduce our carbon emissions by changing our resolution? How can we strike a good balance between watching an image that is pleasing and still not destroying the planet? Do you have any settings that we should put on YouTube or on Netflix?
That's a tough question. Personally, on YouTube, I watch video with a 720p resolution.
Right. Which is more than adequate, especially if we're looking at a small screen. Like on a telephone, between 480, 720, 1080. And 4K doesn't even make sense on a telephone, right? So, but then again, maybe that comes also to the idea of our behavior. Maybe we were pushed to think that bigger, more high resolution is always better, so we have to buy bigger TVs. But maybe we can live with smaller TV screens, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys have any questions about, no? Did you find any questions on that?
Yes, also when we watch an offline video that we save by ourselves and that we watch after, does the recording produce more or less than when we watch this video with the connection?
So, in a way, so the idea is, for example, it's also, I guess, true for listening to music, right?
Yes.
So if you want to listen on Spotify to something, is it better to listen to it with a stream, or is it better to download the album or the song and then listen to it offline?
It's better to download because you download the data just one time and then use them as many times as you want.
As opposed to always streaming when you're going to watch.
And you download the data all the time when you hear the music or watch a video when you're online.
Okay. And anything about maybe cloud storage, or is it better to store things in the cloud, or if it's better to store it on your own hard drive in terms of carbon emissions?
It's better to store it on your own hard drive because when you store it on a cloud storage platform, when you want to access your data, the data need to travel from the data centers to your computer.
As opposed to when you have it on your computer, that has been done one time and you're not going to emit carbon for each time you access it. Okay. Maybe we can go to Louise, who also had a few recommendations about how we can reduce our carbon emissions when it comes to internet use. What do you have for us?
So as say Anastasia, we can you have to keep your devices for longer and prefer reconditioned rather than new products.
Right.
But also you have to switch on the sleep mode, because even when you're not using your phone or computer, there are some part of your computer that is still working at the GPS or things like that.
Right. There's a lot of things in the background of your devices that consumes energy, which is not necessary.
Yes.
Not for you, at least.
And to reduce the email pollution, you can empty your mailbox regularly or unsubscribe from any newsletter that you don't read. And you have to we can create taxes, because with taxes all the user would be aware of the action, and I think it
right.
won't...
You can see the cost of the carbon that you're emitting, which might change your behavior more easily than if you think that everything is free and has no cost when it comes to carbon or other things.
And I think it won't limit the liberty of the user, because user will have the same access to the same function as now, but they will be more aware of the action.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I think there's a lot of psychology when it comes to, I think, internet use, if you want to be more aware of our carbon emissions. And I think the idea of a tax as a visualization of what the carbon cost is of something is a good way of making people aware. Because especially on the internet, we're used to having things for free, but nothing is free. So we're paying for it in another way. And that would be a good way of seeing this. Okay. I think that's a pretty long and good summary of most of the stuff you talked about. So maybe we can spend a few minutes on questions from your classmates. Carla, you seem to have a question coming from someone.
So do you know how these emissions are calculated for email or
Right.
SMS?
So that's the reason I think this question came up was we always hear these things like, oh, every time you keep your emails stored in your mailbox, it's the equivalent of how many kilograms of carbon. Do you have an idea how that stuff is calculated?
Yes, I made some research, and with ACV, in French it's Analyse de cycle de vie,
Okay.
that quantifies the environmental impacts of a product through its cycles of life, and this is how we calculate this amount.
So it's actually researchers who, based on how our internet infrastructure works, have an idea of, for example, if we keep it here, how much electricity we need to keep it on these servers, how many times we access it, and they sort of give an estimate of how many grams or kilograms of carbon that corresponds to. Yeah, that was an interesting question, I remember. Marion?
Internet has been like the beacon of to show us how our society has evolved. And do you think by creating taxes or limiting the production, etc., you're going to slow down not the evolution, but the
Progress.
progress?
Innovation. So if we want to keep progressing and innovating, is it a bad idea to put taxes to limit our production, consumption,
not
all these
only
things?
taxes, but don't you think that internet is what is one of our tools, and limiting it would be a problem
So
in the future?
right, so you're saying yes, it does emit, but it's also a tool, and maybe what
Yes.
it brings is more important than what it takes away.
Yes, because with internet, everyone is connected with information. etc. So, do you think it's
Interesting
better
question.
to keep the internet or to limit it?
What do you guys think? It's an interesting question. It's almost a philosophical question, but it requires, I think, some complex calculations, because you have to be able to find a way of making an estimate of what the internet brings in terms of new technologies that help limit carbon emissions compared to what it emits itself. Etienne? No.
I think in the internet we can separate the internet in two parts. The useful part that can be used to work, and the non-useful part, like for example video games or social medias. I think we can put taxes and a restriction on the non-useful part, and I don't think it's a good idea to put a restriction on the whole internet. We have to choose what we want to put laws in and what we want to restrict.
So you're saying there's a good internet and there's a bad internet. And we should not restrict the good internet, but we should put restrictions on the bad internet? Kind of? How do we decide what is good internet and bad internet then? So for example, I can be an old grumpy guy and say, oh, TikTok is a bad internet, but maybe there's a bunch of people on there, giving little physics lessons, and it's helping young people be educated about it. How do we decide? Who decides what is good internet and what is bad internet? It's not an easy problem.
There is no really way to decide, but I think we just have to say that something is good and something is bad, and maybe make, if for TikTok, if some people use TikTok to give lessons, physics lessons, we can make other social medias that will be good and that will be made for those people to do.
So we make
their
a physics TikTok, and it's only for giving physics lessons, but then we take away the TikTok where people are dancing.
No, we can don't completely take it away, but restrict it.
Okay. I think it's not possible to not think about choices like this, but at the same time, it's a difficult choice to make, because who should decide, or how can we decide what is good and what is bad, right? Inspiration can come from all sorts of places. But are all four of you guys agreeing that maybe we do need to put internet under some sort of restrictions in terms of how much we use it, how we use it, or not? Just as your own personal opinions.
Yeah, I do believe.
So Anastasia is for restricting the internet a bit, maybe. Victor, we know where he stands on this. Etienne is the one who's talking about the good and bad internet. What about Louise?
Yes, maybe.
All right, this group is decided on this. Carla, did you have any other questions from the class that were interesting?
Also, there is a question which is it possible to separate our internet use from our economic model of consumerism?
Which is kind of linked to a lot of these other questions. What do you guys think about that? Is it possible to separate our use and, I guess, implementation of the internet from our economic model? The economic model being consumerism, right? Like we're using the internet in a way that we want people to always be using more. We want to always be growing. We want to always produce more phones, newer phones, bigger screens, and more shows on. So is it possible to, I guess, coming back to the question, using the internet in a good way without necessarily always being in growth, maybe? Realistically speaking and idealistically speaking. It's a tough question, I know. I think Etienne wants to say something.
I don't think so, because now we're talking about internet, but when it's come to reducing carbon emissions, the main solution is to reduce consumption. And not only about internet, but about everything. So I think our usage of internet is linked to our economical model. And if we want to change the usage of internet, we have to change the whole economical model.
So for you, the problem is not separate. If you want, so for you, the difficulty is that we have. It's going to be very difficult to change our economic model.
Yes.
That's where the main difficulty is coming from. And if we do change that, yeah, Victor?
I don't think so either, because the GAFAM, the biggest companies of the world,
Google, Amazon, Facebook, all these,
they are all web giants.
So for you, they have too much power.
Yeah.
And they will prevent any change of our economic model.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they all work through the internet.
So you guys are very pessimistic in general. The youth is pessimistic about the future and their changing necessary changes. Okay. Any other questions, my co-hosts, that you guys found interesting? No? We went through a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of topics in there which are interesting, but it's very difficult to fix and to go into that without going into too many details. Maybe one final question for each of you guys. How did you guys learn anything new? Did you find some stuff that was very surprising when you were doing your research? How did you find your topic? Yeah, Anastasia?
Well, I was a bit shocked because, like, when I use my phone or all the devices, I don't think about everything that's behind it and all the impact that it can have on places that I don't even know. Like, for my phone, maybe there is someone who's going to extract in a dangerous area.
Region of the world,
Yeah, and impact the environment in this place, and for me to just use it on something that maybe won't be really important, but just to distract myself.
So it made you more aware of the actual cost of things when you were doing this research. Okay. Maybe the other ones, what did you guys find most striking or shocking or interesting in the course of your research, Louise?
I didn't know that the amount of CO2 linked to the use of internet was such a big number.
Yeah.
And even a message, it produces 14 microgram of CO2,
Right.
but only one, it's nothing, but
we have
send,
how many millions of messages
yes.
are exchanged every day or every hour on all the platforms. I think that's the thing that is most surprising, is that, especially maybe for your generation, you guys were born when the internet was already in full flight, and so it's something that has been around forever, right?
Yes.
And we never think about it in terms of the cost of it, but there is a cost, right? Etienne or Victor, did you guys have any remarks in particular about your researchers and the stuff you found?
The same as Liz.
Has it changed your opinion on how you're going to behave, do you think?
In
Etienne?
general, no, but in some particular point, like the resolution of the YouTube video, yes, maybe I will use a lower resolution.
Such a small thing to do, have an image which is maybe slightly less clear, but when we know that even that can make a difference, for you, that's like, you're going to do this.
Yes.
Okay, small gestures, right? Maybe my co-host, since you guys weren't doing the research on this and you were there in the audience, what did you find most interesting about this? Maybe we can start with Carla.
I think like the solutions that they proposed also to reduce like the pollution from data centers. I never thought about like putting data centers underwater because I thought that it would like make them not useful usable anymore. But in fact, it's an idea, and I don't know if it's really being applied.
I think it is difficult in terms of the infrastructure. I think Microsoft was trying to do this at some point. I don't know if we have reached the conclusion whether it's feasible or not. But so you found interesting the possible solutions to these problems that you had never thought about before. Marion, what about you?
I think it was a very interesting presentation because I didn't realize how much internet was polluting.
Yeah.
Because it is an essential part of our lives now. And I think it's very important that we find durable solutions in the future, but it seems complicated.
Right. And it's only going to get worse because our internet infrastructure is growing constantly and we're using it for more things. It's becoming more and more essential. So we need to find a solution, right? All right. Well, thank you to all four of you guys, all six of you guys. I found the presentation very interesting, like every other topic, but I think this is one which is maybe more close to you guys compared to maybe some stuff which is more esoteric, like transport or agriculture, which are just as important because you guys have a more contact with internet usage in your daily lives. So thank you very much, and it was a really good job.
So that is Physics Bites for this week. But before we say goodbye, it's your turn to think about the question and try and answer one of the following. What are you willing to do to reduce your contribution to the carbon footprint of the internet? And secondly, in your opinion, does the internet bring more good to our fight against climate change, or does it do more harm? We are looking forward to hearing from you in the comments section. So, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Physics Bites. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave us a review, a rating, tell us how much you enjoyed Physics Bites. Talk to you next week.